Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raghav, and I'm currently a rising high school senior residing in the Dallas suburbs. Now, before I begin today, I just want to mention that everything that I described today is a collage of my observations and experiences as a 17-year-old. There is so much of the world I have not seen and many events and activities that I've never gotten to experience. Keeping that in mind, something that I've been constantly obsessed with is the idea of passion, or in other words, being passionate about something. Now you're probably asking yourself, why passion? And even if you aren't, just feel free to pretend as if you were, and we can move along. Well, now, before I answer that question about why passion matters, the first thing I want to set straight is what passion is. I'm sure that all of us have heard of what passion describes and means, but we all know better. The Oxford Dictionary is always right. In there, passion is defined as a strong and barely controllable emotion. Barely controllable. I want you to keep this phrase in mind. A passion for something is an emotion that is barely controllable. What makes a person passionate about something is that their curiosity for that subject is barely controllable. Their desire to take on that activity is barely controllable. Their need to talk about that activity constantly is barely controllable. Their urge to get back to doing that activity is again barely controllable. Now, there are many forms of passion around us, whether it be romantic, philanthropic, political, environmental. But what I want to focus on today is the role of passion in our current day academics and the role that passion plays when people are trying to consume knowledge. Now, knowledge here is a very, very important and also a broad thing to materialize. For us, knowledge is almost like this vast and intangible pool of information. There is so much information within our world, and theoretically, knowledge is an encapsulation of all of those little details and facts. And this is the focus of all education, providing this abstract idea of knowledge to students in order for them to learn all those little details and facts and make it a part of their own knowledge. In this sense, we can think of knowledge as this large entity, and every single person has their own smaller entity of knowledge. And all of the information that makes up these individuals' knowledge comes from the aforementioned large universal entity of knowledge. What makes this knowledge so powerful is that people are able to integrate and combine all these little bits of information that make up their own knowledge to think and innovate. The whole purpose of learning is to be able to make these connections. It's the whole point of an education system that harbors an integrated curriculum teaching a broad array of subjects to students all at once. Okay, now, so I'm going to be doing sort of a short science lesson here, but I want you to remember what you know about kinetics and kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy that describes a substance that is in motion. And as you learned in physics class, the formula to calculate kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared. The m represents the mass of a substance and the v represents the velocity or speed of a substance. Now, if this is the only source of information you have in your knowledge bubble, then all you can do is calculate the kinetic energy when someone provides you with the mass and the speed of a substance. However, this whole sense of integration and connection comes into play when we think about the same formula in the context of chemistry. Well, we know that the temperature of a substance is proportional to its kinetic energy, meaning that if two substances had the same temperature, then they would have approximately the same kinetic energy. So let's say that we have two gas particles, both at the same temperature but have a different mass. Which one has a higher rate of diffusion, or in other words, velocity or speed? This is where our physics lessons come back into play. Kinetic energy is again 1/2 mv squared. So if we know that the kinetic energy is the same for both substances due to having the same temperature, and that substance A is more massive than substance B, then In order to get that same kinetic energy value, we would need to have a lower velocity for particle A, making it have a slower rate of diffusion. Well, even if that was a bit confusing, the thing to realize here is the fact that not only were we able to integrate physics and chemistry together, we also used the fundamentals of mathematical reasoning to apply this information and conclude with a new result. And this here is what I'm trying to prove. Knowledge is most important and powerful when the information that you're learning is able to be connected and integrated together. And the process of learning all of this information to be able to connect it together and apply it is a role that passion plays in our education. Students are most passionate to learn and are able to gain this incredible ability to connect when there's a genuine interest in the topics being learned. If everyone is passionate about what they are learning, we would all have these great thinkers being able to connect everything around them and piece this whole puzzle together. But why isn't it there? Is there a lack of passion in our current day youth? And what are the reasons for it? I think that there are many aspects as to why students might lack the necessary passion that they need in order to actively and efficiently learn. One of the first and most important things that pertains to this topic is none other than the idea that many are pursuing passions that they think they're supposed to be pursuing rather than looking for options that are genuinely interesting to them. In the world that we live in today, a majority of the progressions we make as a society and the advancements that are recognized are with regards to technology, specifically computer science and engineering. With things like artificial intelligence and machine learning taking new heights, a lot of the career paths are being taken to the shadows, reducing in their popularity. Humanities majors are being undermined and their significant contributions to our society are being overlooked. Therefore, when students are interested in topics like these, they get a response that basically sounds like, really? This sort of mentality towards the subject not only demoralizes the passionate students interested in these subjects, but it also forces them to move to different, more popular areas of studies. Okay, so here's a personal anecdote of mine that sort of resembles this trend. In eighth grade, I remember going to my American history class and learning about the ancient cultures of the Americas from the 1400s and 1500s, when the cultures of North and South America were extremely diverse and beautifully sophisticated. I was in love with the subject, so much so that I actually went to major in archaeology. I had a passion for it. I wanted to seek knowledge in the subject, uncover the past, etc. But as it happens, the environment that I grew up in focused on technology, the phones, the tablets, the computers. I was so saturated in this technology driven environment that eventually I lost my unique and great passion for archaeology. All this stated, the idea that I'm trying to portray here is that students are not pursuing passions that others want them to pursue, rather than pursuing what they want to pursue themselves. Of course, another reason that the passion for learning might, another reason that students might lose their passion for learning is the use of numerical values to provide feedback about the student's learning. Now, let me describe this to you with the use of an example. So, I have a friend, yes, I have friends, also a high schooler, who was extremely interested in physics and how it was able to describe the world around us, explaining why things happen as they do. They were interested in why we were able to run, why an object moves in a certain way if it's thrown off a cliff, etc. All of this was interesting to them, but when their learning of the subject would be reflected in a non satisfying numerical grade, their passion is compromised because it provides feedback to them that makes them think that they were not meant for this subject. Not meant for this subject. This form of demoralization inaccurately describes their learning, making them eventually lose interest in the topic and just not want to do it anymore. What they found so intriguing is not what seems to them like an unattainable feat. All of this plays into the last aspect that takes away the passion to learn from an individual. And that is the point that many people are being transformed to a mindset that makes them want to study for the sake of college and not for the sake of their individual learning. In other words, students are really focused on studying to go to college rather than going to college to study. Sometimes this ideology is valid because students that show interest before they get into college to study that field demonstrate their passion for the subject and the high levels of interest that they have for it. But my question for you is whether is it really their interest that is motivating them or the competitive environment that they're being brought up in? My reason for stating this is not to patronize the passion that I know several students have for their learning, but instead, in order to help others think about the true reasons for why they are motivated to learn. Because learning for the wrong reasons is not what causes that barely controllable passion that we talked about at the beginning. It isn't what allows you to connect your knowledge together and think and innovate. We have to learn for the right reasons. We have to learn for ourselves. We have to develop a true passion for our learning that comes from within us. Also, not only is learning for the wrong reasons hindering us from building a passion for learning, it also has a lot of other side effects on our lives as students as well. Some of the broad and most important ones being the rise of depression, the worsening of mood, and an increasing lack of developing meaningful relationships. Now, how does this all apply to me and like my personality? As a kid, I was incredibly interested in everything I was learning, and I wanted to go to school and I wanted to learn. I was so fascinated with the principles of math, moved by other people's writing, and loved to learn about the world through the perspective of natural science. All of this drove my passion as a kid for learning and allowed me to apply these different subjects I was learning to craft my own bubble of knowledge. But somewhere throughout my academic journey, my learning started to revolve around the idea of college and not learning the things that I actually cared about. I struggled a lot, stressed out over the wrong things, built relationships for the wrong reasons, all because I was not passionate about something. I was lost. I was lost for a long time. But eventually, I came to a realization that I wanted to learn for myself, not for others. I wanted to learn something that I truly enjoyed doing, and eventually, I found it. Now that I know my true purpose and my purpose for learning, learning doesn't feel like a struggle anymore. It feels like a challenge. And my urge to face that challenge head on is barely controllable. Last thing I want to mention before I sign off for today: learn for the sake of yourself and not for anybody else. Find the passion within you that is barely controllable. Thank you so much. Good luck and good night.